Hi, my name is Jerry. On YouTube, I'm known as Obamamaniac. I've recently found out about the group feature on YouTube and have decided to utilize it to create my own group called Moderate Faith Perspectives. Before I tell you about that, though, I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself. I was born January 19th, 1986 in Long Beach, California, but I've spent most of my life in Escondido, California. I grew up in a fairly religious Christian, particularly Catholic Christian family, and my father was a Knight of Columbus, and both my mother and grandmother were catechism teachers, and we were fairly active in our church. I know some of you are probably thinking, oh, you poor thing, you grew up in a fundamentalist family, didn't you? Well, no, I didn't. I wouldn't call my family liberal either, but I know that most of them aren't walking, talking clones of Pat Robertson. As a child, and I'm fairly sure with most children, faith in God came fairly easily to me. Back then, complex theological questions such as the benefits and flaws of organized religion or whether or not God takes sides in wars has never occurred to me. Growing up autistic, I had my own challenges and problems, but my spiritual quest for most of my childhood was relatively easy. That all changed when my grandmother died, though, unexpectedly on what would be 10 years ago this next May. After a great deal of suffering, her body just shut down. She was only 64. To make a long story short, I went through hell. I developed feelings which my 12-year-old mind could not even begin to comprehend, and which now, even with a more advanced mind and a more versatile vocabulary, cannot even begin to find the words to describe. Sometimes I couldn't stop crying. Sometimes I felt like crying, but nothing came out. Sometimes I felt pure rage. Sometimes I felt a bizarre combination of emotions, which often contradicted one another. Sometimes I felt nothing at all. Medication and therapy helped me by keeping me stable, understand my emotions, and having someone to talk to, but also helped me with turning to God. Faith gave me the hope that no matter how much pain I was going through, that things could get better, that I could overcome my depression and one day reunite with my grandmother in heaven. Now, I'd be lying to you all if I said that I did not have doubts or that I did not occasionally blame God for not letting my grandmother live. But true faith comes not through lack of doubt, anguish, or challenges, but by praying for the strength and wisdom to overcome these things. In my high school years, I'd eventually find myself trapped in a spiritual confusion. I saw many things in the church and in politics which has angered me, still angers me today. I saw an unjust and illegal war in Iraq and shameful abuses of human rights, such as torture, being justified by a theology of righteous empire, where it's assumed that everything America does, right or wrong, is blessed by God. I saw religious McCarthyism that viewed anyone it disagreed with not as fellow citizens to be convinced, but as enemies to be scapegoated, conquered, and subjugated in the name of Prince of Peace. I saw a narrow, selective, ultra-partisan morality which only viewed gay marriage and abortion as moral issues, while ignoring the suffering of the poor, the sick, and the outcast. In short, I have seen corruption, self-righteousness, and hypocrisy. Now, I've never told anyone this before, even my own family, so here goes. Knowing this, I made the decision to swear off organized religion. At that time, I still believed in God, but I saw organized religion as excessively dogmatic, legalistic, corrupt, hypocritical, and as inhibiting spirituality instead of enhancing it. Despite my rejection of organized religion, I was still interested in spiritual matters and studied different religious traditions as well as ancient Greek and Eastern philosophers, and even explored different interpretations of the Christian faith. During my spiritual study, I've learned many things and incorporated many concepts in my spiritual, philosophical, and political worldview, most notably the concept of moderation espoused by the ancient Greek philosophers and the Buddhists in the form of what they called the middle way. Now, despite all this, though, part of me still felt an attachment to the faith I grew up with. I missed the sense of belonging to a community that I had when I went to church, yet the cynical part of me kept me away. The cynical part of me slowly melted away, though, when I found out about an organization which I had mentioned in one of my previous videos called Sojourners. Now, for those of you that don't know, Sojourners is a Christian organization whose goal is to expand the debate over faith, God, and morality to include issues like poverty, war and peace, environmental protection, AIDS, and other social justice issues. I liked their message, so I signed up for Sojourners' weekly email list, where they send you all these free articles from their own website as well as other media sources. I eventually figured out that much of the opinions expressed in those articles were things I'd learned as a child, and realized that while individual spiritual inquiry is an important part of spiritual development, that communal spiritual development, such as the kind I had when I was a child with my church for many years, was equally important to spiritual development. It is for that reason that I had returned to the faith of my childhood, where I still remain. Now that I've told you about myself, I'll tell you about the group I've created called Moderate Faith Perspectives. Moderate Faith Perspectives is a group for anyone who believes in God of any religious tradition, who feels that the religious right and other fundamentalist groups don't speak for them, can discuss God, faith, spirituality, politics, etc. I have created this group not as an effort to establish an equally partisan religious left like Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton might want to do, but to start a real dialogue here on YouTube of what it really means to be a person of faith, which is sorely lacking in the media, which seems to focus mainly on the loudest and most extreme voices, as well as to broaden the definition of moral values to include issues like poverty, the environment, human rights, and other social and economic justice issues. So I welcome any religious or spiritual person who wants to discuss alternatives to fundamentalism to join my group, and hopefully we can create a much needed dialogue here on YouTube.